The Dred Scott decision, which was handed down by the Supreme Court in 1857, is one of the most famous or infamous decisions in all of the history of the Supreme Court. And it arose out of some complicated issues, but what it basically had to do with was the power of Congress to prohibit slavery in the Western territories. Dred Scott had been brought as a slave into the territory of Wisconsin, where slavery had been barred by Congress, and later he sued for his freedom on the ground that he had been in a place where slavery had been abolished and therefore should be considered free. And this goes all the way up through various courts, and the Supreme Court eventually rules, no, Dred Scott's not free because, two reasons. One, Congress does not have the right to prohibit slavery in the territories, and this basically declares the Republican Party unconstitutional. The Republican platform, Lincoln's platform, which is to prohibit slavery in the territories, the Supreme Court said you can't do that. Slavery has a right to go anywhere within the country in a territory, not a state. A state can abolish slavery. Illinois did. But the territories which belong to the whole country, slavery has a right to go there. The second principle put down by Chief Justice Taney in the Dred Scott decision was that blacks cannot be citizens of the United States. In a sense, Dred Scott can't even sue because he's not an American. This is one of the best examples of this notion of blacks as aliens. Even though he's born here and everything, he is not an American. The American family, as Taney says, is for white people. And in the most famous sentence in that decision, he says, a black man has no rights which a white man is bound to respect. Now, he's not saying blacks can be killed with impunity. What he's saying is, legally speaking, they are not part of the body politic. They are not part of the we the people that created the Constitution, and therefore they're just outside of the system. So they don't have any rights under the Constitution because the Constitution is for white people. Now, people have denounced Taney ever since for this, and for good reason, but the fact is this decision was codifying widely held views in American society, North and South. You know, you're blaming the messenger in a sense if you simply hold the Chief Justice responsible for these views. But it's certainly the position that Congress could not stop the westward spread of slavery discredited the Supreme Court in the eyes of large numbers of Northerners, including Lincoln. Lincoln is denouncing them after this and saying, Lincoln, who is a law-abiding guy, says we don't have to recognize this decision. We're going to ignore it. It's a bad decision. And when the Republicans get in, we are not going to abide by the Dred Scott decision. So it shows you how far the sectional dispute has gotten that a guy like Lincoln will say the ruling of the Supreme Court can just be ignored because it's so, wrong-headed.
So positive law doesn't apply to the people by their own mouth because they don't know it's a caste system. It's a class and caste system. Status. And so this is why you must understand law and history. And it's a little deal. And so if a person belongs to an organization that doesn't deal with law, they don't know that they're actually cheating the people because they are trained to think that these are separate disciplines. They're not separate disciplines. They go together. Law and history goes together like your left leg and your right leg. And if one is missing, you're limping, i.e. you're handicapped. And so our people look at these things as if they're opinions. You know, this group believes this. This group believes that. And you know that's the mentality. Now, to get past that emotionalism with them and to be respectful with them in a conversation, to get them to a point of reasoning so that you can give them some information, they usually get defensive. Oh, my leader guy didn't say this. And they start doing that. It's like a third-party perspective. And you can take a child to a dictionary and show them everything. I mean, so what do you do with that? Meanwhile, the civilized world is not forgiving with that.
A plausible denial, something like that.
Plausible deniability.
Yes, but in law, we're not forgiving. And this is the problem with us collectively as a people. The people are not aware of that because the teachers haven't explained that to them. They're just arguing black and white.
The same words that we were saying today, the same words that we're saying today, the same words that people said over 100 years ago. The same words that we were saying today, the same words that we're saying today, the same words that people said over 100 years ago. The same words that we were saying today, the same words that we're saying today, the same words that people said over 100 years ago. years ago? Why are we in a new day when we're saying the same thing that someone said 100 years ago? He goes on to say, and it is worth emphasizing here at the very beginning that these flights into fantasy were based on the same hard facts that gripped the imagination of blacks in the second Reconstruction of the 1960s and 70s. There was, for example, a black man in the U.S. Senate in the 1870s. And there was a black governor in Louisiana. In the 1860s and the 1870s, as in the 1960s and 1970s, there were black sheriffs and mayors in the South. And there was open speculation about a black vice presidential candidate. So the Jesse run is not new in black American history, ladies and gentlemen. There was moreover a network of civil rights laws that seemed to settle the issue beyond all possibility of dispute or recall. Same kind of situation we talk about here today when you try to tell our people that laws don't protect anyone. There are so many of us who believe that fair housing laws and anti-discrimination laws and civil rights laws and voting laws and so forth guarantee our freedom. What an illusion. What a flight into fantasy. Laws are no stronger than their enforcers. And the same people who pass those laws are the same people who are responsible for enforcing the law. And if the people then who enforce the law no longer decide to do so, the laws then are of no value and have no power. Ultimately then, fairness rests, and the fairness and treatment rests, not in laws, but in the activities of people, and in the attitude and consciousness of people. And if people who are responsible for enforcing those laws change their attitudes, then the treatment of those people whose freedom is protected by those so-called laws is now changed as well. You cannot put your faith in a white man's law and in laws enforced by whites. I have warned people many times that if it comes one day where the society has to make a choice between feeding white children and feeding black children, no amounts of civil rights laws or any other laws on the books will prevent those people from feeding their children first. It is a silly faith that we have then in laws.